happy to introduce myself, Natalie Khawam with Whistleblowers of America. Natalie Khawam with Whistleblowers of America. Today we're discussing the way that the Whistleblower Act has impacted whistleblowers at the VA. And we have a few whistleblowers here and journalists, and I think that's correct, right? That's what we have. Okay. You want to introduce yourself?
My name is Mike Volpe, I'm an investigative reporter. Done stories in almost all the whistleblowers here.
I'm DeNofrio, I'm a whistleblower at the VA.
Dan Martin, whistleblower, chief engineer at North Indiana VA.
And Dale Klein, VA whistleblower from Missouri.
So, as everyone knows about watching the news and seeing what's happening in our society today, whistleblowers have come out more, have been more recognized, more whistleblowing has occurred, especially at the VA. As an attorney, a whistleblower attorney, I get phone calls all the time about matters that have impacted whistleblowers. They'll call me about the retaliation that occurs, different forms of retaliation that's occurring, not necessarily just a termination. You'll get mistreatment, hostile work environment, blackballing, where a lot of people won't talk to the whistleblower, so that becomes, quite honestly, it impacts them not just physically, where they're being put in remote rooms or locations, being changed, positions being changed, moved around in the organization, but also emotionally. You know, there's a lot of emotional impact here. So you all see a degree of damages from financial damages to emotional. It's emotional abuse really is what's happening. The act that was passed was intended for executives to be terminated, but we're seeing a lot more just whistleblowers being terminated, quite honestly. And today we have a few whistleblowers to discuss their stories, how it has impacted their lives, and I think we should go from there. You want to start with Dr. Klein?
I'm recovering from vocal cord surgery, so I hope everyone can hear me okay. And because of my voice, I'm going to limit my comments this morning. And I know that there's some people in the room who already know my story, so I'm just going to give a quick 30-second recap so we're all on the same page. The Poplar Bluff VA Medical Center in Missouri was built in the 1940s, and it never had a pain management clinic. And I was hired to start that clinic. And shortly after I started working there, I discovered fraud, waste, abuse, and substandard care, and eventually I reported that. And long story short, OIG actually did a good job investigating my case and substantiated all of my claims. In addition to that, OSC concluded an investigation that basically I'm a whistleblower and I was retaliated against. And in addition to that, OSC concluded another investigation that I was wrongfully terminated. So I, in fact, have 3 independent federal investigations in my favor. And a lot of people don't know there's actually multiple other federal investigations that are pending. So if my case drags on long enough, I'm confident I'll have more than 3. And I see Tom Devine in the audience here. I hope he doesn't mind if I share this story. That Tom is one of the most experienced whistleblower attorneys in the United States. I think yesterday I heard you say that you've been doing this for 40 years and more than 7,000 whistleblower clients. And a long time ago, Tom told me that he does not recall ever hearing one whistleblower having 2 OSC determinations in their favor, which I do. In fact, I have 3 federal investigations. So the bottom line is I have a very strong case. And in addition to that, if anyone listened to the July 17th House Veteran Affairs Committee meeting this past July, last month, the secretary at that time said that the VA, in regards to my case, quote, screwed up, and even went on to say that multiple VA employees served 14-day suspensions secondary to retaliating against me, and I had heard that through the grapevine before, so essentially the secretary confirmed what I had heard. I don't know the exact number, but I've heard possibly a half a dozen people had punitive actions taken against them because of what they did against me. Now, to tie this into OAWP, after all of that, the tremendous support I've had, obviously OAWP did not protect me because I was terminated. And many people have said if OAWP cannot protect me, well then who can they protect? A lot more I could say, but I'm going to give my voice a rest here and I'll go back to you.
Tam, would you like to share your story, or can we?
Oh, God, I'll go through it real quick. I think most of y'all know my story. Been covered in news quite a bit. I guess the thing I'd like to speak to, or if there's any questions, is I came to the VA and I'm on their webpage. Vote Rehab is one of their success stories. This is something my wife and I talked about this morning. Now I'm one of their failures. How can you be a success and a failure? Because all I did was expose contract fraud. Speaking like you said to that gentleman that asked the question, which answered that question in Congress, he brought up your name and he brought up mine. I was kind of eager to hear his answer. We can get to that. Hopefully one day we will. But it's unfortunate. I have to say, OSC has been investigating my case. They originally closed it out, but ironically, the guy who was investigating as part of their intake was former VA employee, and he shut it down and said it was unsubstantiated. Then they reopened it. Same thing. So the stuff that Tom moderated yesterday, OSC is correct. They've made some changes, very positive changes, at least in my world. I can't speak for everybody else. And I saw something yesterday. I have no idea if it has to do with me, but GAO came out with a report regarding the VA's major construction and what they call non-recurring maintenance and minor projects. That's always been my contention. There's no oversight of all this stuff in these contracts, and most of the engineers don't know what stuff costs. They have no real world experience, and that was one of the findings in the GAO report, to figure out how to estimate the stuff. And that's where I can go into this for hours, but I just want to say that I want to acknowledge great things that Tom represents me and his crew on this. They've done a fantastic job to get OSC to open up the case again, take a look at me, and really, it's not even about me. It's about the folks in Northern Indiana. They're really great people there, if they're allowed to do their job, and I'm here to basically advocate for them and all other VA employees, I guess. So anyway, I've kind of blabbered about enough.
Okay, if you're ready to speak, thanks.
My name is DeNofrio. I'm a whistleblower at the VA. Before I start, I want to thank the Whistleblower Forum for having me. Thank you for being on this panel. I want to thank my wife, Becky, who's my hero personally through the past 5 years. What's that?
I had to thank my wife too.
You can also say.
I have it written down.
My whistleblower story is pretty much it's different. It's always a different story with different people, but it seems to be the same theme. I don't want to focus too much on what happened to me. I want to talk about whistleblowing at the VA, what it's like for whistleblowers down at the VA, because there was a panel on Monday. Dan was on that panel, did a great job. But I think there's some confusion about what's actually happening at the VA and with VA whistleblowers and the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. I've been with the VA for almost 20 years. I have had a 16-year stellar career that's included being handpicked as a VA certified mentor, a subject matter expert who developed patient care programs that are now national best practices in rehabilitation medicine, and received outstanding ratings for the past 11 years despite being a VA whistleblower and despite being under 11 separate formal investigations, including a formal AMG, and currently under formal fact-finding after reporting issues with the CLC, the nursing homes at the VA. I've made reports to the Office of Inspector General, the Special Counsel, the Office of Civil Rights, the FBI, the Department of Justice, and basically anybody who would listen, because veterans, I am a veteran myself. I'm retired from military intelligence. I was severely injured, and that has been my life, that's been my calling, and that story needs to be heard by anybody who will listen. And I also want to thank the media. You have received the emails, many emails from you, and I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. In 2013, I reported an alleged impaired physician who appeared to be a danger to himself and veterans. Rather than review my reports, VA officials gave my protective reports to my supervisors and attempted to cover up the problems until the physician was ultimately removed from duty in 2015, 2 years later. In 2014, I reported that hundreds of veterans returning from wars in Iraq and Afghanistan after sustaining traumatic brain injuries, TBIs, and were supposed to be individually case managed by VA officials, were receiving no care. 7 of those patients on that list, they killed themselves. I came into work one day, they were bringing the young man up off the parking lot, which is very hard to see. One gentleman, he's not a gentleman, he was a veteran. He was in that program and he went to a local subway and shot 3 people, including a young child. Again, the VA was reporting that all these patients were receiving care on a regular basis, that they were all stable, which was untrue. The Office of Inspector General did not investigate that matter for 2 years. 2 years later, the director who I had charged with wrongdoing was given the responsibility of doing the investigation himself rather than investigation being conducted by the OIG criminally. And the complaint was partially substantiated. In 2015, I reported VA was paying a part-time contract audiologist the equivalent of $2.5 million, who was claiming to see 72 patients per day, which is, those of you who are clinicians, Dr. Klein, you know that's physically impossible. In 2016, the President continued to make whistleblower reports that include allegations of criminal activity, abuse of authority, obstruction of justice of VA senior officials. Again, my retaliation is very similar to many people. I was removed, basically became a persona non grata, removed from my duties. I was removed from all committees. One issue, I was placed under 11 investigations. Those investigations accused me of falsely claiming I was illegally accessing VA employee medical records, that I was leaking public records that are on the VA website to the media, that I was illegally accessing, that I was upward bullying leadership officials, including senior executives, by making reports to the Office of Special Counsel, which they based that claim on Australian law, not U.S. laws. I was speaking with law enforcement officials, including the OIG and the FBI, on federal time, and I was only able to keep my job because former Representative Jeff Miller personally intervened on my behalf, and Senator Robert Casey also intervened, allowed me to keep my job. Otherwise, I would have been fired multiple times. After this happened, VA officials began accessing and distributing my personal medical records. I believe at last count there was 500 accesses into my medical records, even though I don't get care at the hospital where I work. They were altered to include a mental disorder on my problem list. VA officials attempted to give my personal information to a dangerous veteran. I'm an administrator. I have to sign off on all the patients that act up at the VA. What they were trying to do was give these patients my name and say, here's the guy who reported you, go get him. This gentleman that they tried to give my information to, so Congressman Miller stepped in, had a history of physically assaulting caregivers and their families and stalking them in their homes. VA officials admitted they were placing my personal medical records on a SharePoint site, an online website. My whistleblower reports to OIG were intercepted, and others were included in that illegal website. The VA Office of Inspector General refused to investigate the matters of the charges of obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and I was told by the Inspector General after communicating with Secretary Shulkin that the matter was too embarrassing for the VA to investigate. Past 2 weeks, OSC has opened its complaints, so there is some movement going on there. My whistleblower retaliation has been in civil proceedings since 2013. In 2015, my case advanced from the MSVP system, but was stalled until 2017, while VA subjected me, my coworkers, and submitted my witnesses to a retaliatory AIB. What had happened is we went in court, they placed all the witnesses in my case under subpoena, and told them if they testified to a judge, they would all be fired. 50 employees, 50 VA employees were told this. At the MSV hearing, the judge would not accept about 10,000 pages of documents. Our case is now moved to the federal court, the retaliation case over the past several years. That case will be the first VA case to be heard under the Whistleblower Protection Enhancement Act. And potentially, we assume good or bad, will define what is whistleblower retaliation in the Department of Veterans Affairs and all federal agencies. Right now, unless you're basically a prohibited personnel practice taken against you, you have limited recourse. What we're asking is that the investigations, the bullying, and all these things that happen to all whistleblowers, the isolation, getting stuck in rooms with asbestos, getting stuck in a physician, getting stuck in a basement, not seeing patients, that's retaliation. It's common sense. I've been an outspoken critic of the VA that claims accountability and whistleblower protection, including direct communication with the acting secretary, Congress, and the media. Due process for whistleblowers is very slow. OSC only accepts a few cases for that make it MSPB. I think of the 10% that make it MSPB, only 2%, less than 2% get an affirmative decision. I've spent my time this week along with Dr. Klein and Mr. Martin. We have it on Capitol Hill, and I just wanted to share real quick a letter that I gave to Senator Isaacson and Senator Tester's team this week. It says, "Dear Chairman Isaacson and Ranking Member Tester, regarding the lack of accountability of the VA following the passage of the Accountability Act and the Office of Special Counsel in 2018 is again reporting that OSC received more cases from the Department of Veterans Affairs than from any other agency. In FY 2017, OSC received 1,824 complaints from VA employees, meaning 31% of all new complaints OSC received came from the VA. However, the Associated Press reported in 2018 that the number of VA employees fired for disciplinary or performance reasons from the Department of Veterans Affairs has actually dropped to the lowest point since 2011. With most of those employees being low-grade employees, I believe it was housekeeping aides and nursing assistants, and only 15 supervisors fired. I've had the misfortune of witnessing this lack of accountability firsthand, and I've been reporting to the committee over the past year in detail with multiple officials retiring or leaving VA when charged with wrongdoing. In September 2017, a VA Chief of Staff arrogantly announced her retirement while under oath in my whistleblower retaliation hearing, which she was named the subject. Another VA physician who had allegedly accessed my medical records 500 times at multiple VA facilities left the VA and then fled the country. Additionally, no action was taken against the current VISM director, a VA Office of Accountability whistleblower protection official, and several other VA officials who had accessed the illegal AIB SharePoint that contained nearly 10,000 pages of whistleblower protected disclosures to VA OIG and Congress. The matter was reported to VA Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection and former Secretary, mind you, Secretary worked with no response. A VA OIG official then allegedly began offering VA employees career opportunities if they would attack me on social media in an apparent effort to discredit me as a whistleblower. No response has been received to my most recent June 8th letter to Acting Secretary to date. Whistleblowers expose matters of the highest public interest as best demonstrated by the events of the past year at the Department of Veterans Affairs. At the Department of Veterans Affairs, whistleblowers bring forward vital information regarding veterans' care and safety despite ongoing severe whistleblower retaliation that continues to this day despite the passage of the Accountability Act. Due process, like I mentioned, due process for whistleblowers were really slow. It's bureaucratic and it's expensive. I've been in court for 5 years so far, represented myself 4 years on my own. The one thing I am asking, that we did speak to Congress about this week, is we're asking, along with Mr. Devine mentioned, jury trials for whistleblowers in the federal system. We have no access to a trial of our peers. The records that are, when you go to court, that are used against you, you cannot move forward. They're never seen. They're often suppressed under FOIA exemptions. The other thing we ask for is that if the Merit System Protection Board, which is the adjudicator for federal whistleblowers, if they can't make a decision on a case within 180 days, that case will then automatically go to our district federal court, which is the system under the Civil Rights Act, and it's also the system under the Rehab Act for disabled persons and other protected classes. Thank you.
to start by reading you an exact quote from a text message conversation. "You need to get off the island, Whistleblower Island." That was said by a man named Brandon Coleman to Joe Khawam. Brandon Coleman was a whistleblower at the Phoenix VA. Joe Khawam is a whistleblower at the Puerto Rico VA. Brandon continued in that same conversation and said, tell Joe that he's going to bring him into the fold, but all Joe had to do was remain quiet. Joe politely declined. The idea of Whistleblower Island was always offensive to me ever since I saw it. So I wanted to confront Brandon. And in fact, I did reach out to him. And I finally had that chance on Monday. So anybody who's there saw that confrontation. He immediately started saying things like it was a conspiracy theory and that I didn't reach out to him. He's no longer really allowed to talk to the press. He's got to get permission. So when I reach out to him, I get press people. The thing he said is, Whistleblower Island is when you are not working within the system, which is a thought that's even more offensive. What he's saying is that these three gentlemen, all VA whistleblowers and all whistleblowers, they're cowboys. What they do is they find something wrong, they immediately go to the media. They immediately go to Congress. They go to OIG as if they didn't realize I should go up the chain. In fact, if you find something wrong and you go up the chain and it's fixed, I don't even consider you a whistleblower. You just found something wrong. All of these people, they first go up the chain. The reason they go to the media, the reason they go to Congress, the reason they go to OIG is because the chain isn't helping them. So this idea that Brandon is portraying, that we need to work within the system, is completely bogus. So let me tell you about Whistleblower Island. There were two men in the New York City Police Department, Frank Serpico and another guy who's not as well known, David Dirk, who reported widespread graft, cops on the take. They were Whistleblower Island. 2 against 39,000 cops. That's Whistleblower Island. And by the way, they went up the chain. Of course they went up the chain. You always first go up the chain. So let me explain to Brandon and everybody else how corruption works. Corruption works this way. There's a small but significant minority, 20% or more if it's systemic, who are corrupt. And then there's a significant majority, 50% or more, who are too cowardly, or people with not enough integrity to do anything about it. And the rest is Whistleblower Island. And so now let me talk about the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. I'm going to give 2 stories that I think generally describe OAWP. There's Sean Higgins. Sean Higgins is probably the most prolific whistleblower in the VA. 50, 60 disclosures. This man's been terminated 3 times. He was terminated the 3rd time within an hour of Donald Trump signing the bill that created the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection. You know how I know that? I get a call from one whistleblower saying Trump just signed it. And then Sean calls me 15 minutes later and goes, I just got terminated. And then there's Dale Klein. I'm glad Dale didn't describe his whole story because he would have stolen my thunder. Not only does Dale have a great case, but he was the first case at OAWP because his attorney, Natalie, submitted the form on the day the office opened. The first case, the best case, and within 2 months, he's still terminated. This is going to sound like I'm bragging, but I could, if I wanted to, on any given day, call 20 whistleblowers in the VA. Of those, 2 or 3 will tell me that they think the OAWP helps them. The rest of them think it's garbage. Or, it's even worse, it works against them. The main problem with OAWP is, again, you can go back to Serpico. Serpico contributed to a really important New York Times article. As David Durner was the guy who wrote the article. Right before the article got published, he reached out to New York City Police Department. They immediately created a blue ribbon commission of cops. Cops can't investigate cops. It was laughed out of existence. That's what formed the NAP Commission. The other problem with OAWP is this. If you're a whistleblower, you can go up your chain. You can go to OIG, you can go to OSC, you can go to Congress, you can probably go to a whole bunch of other places, you can go to the media, and what they're saying is it's not enough. And Donald Trump says, well, then we'll create another useless office for you to go to. So the problem isn't that we don't have enough places to go to, the problem is the places aren't doing their job.
Amen.
And here's the thing about the VA. It's really just been rotten since it's been created. It was created under Harding. You go look it up, along with the bribery, with the oil rigging. The VA was one of his scandals. It's always been rotten. The only difference is since 2014, the media has documented, I'm part of the media, but we really have. So what's happened is the last 4 years you've seen it. But there are stories from the 60s, from the 70s, from the 30s, and the 40s that are the same as it is now. The problem is that it's just a rotten agency. So I want to end it with a quote, with probably Serpico's most famous quote from the Nat Commission. The problem is that the atmosphere does not yet exist in which an honest police officer can act without fear or ridicule or reprisal from fellow police officer. Police corruption cannot exist unless it is at least tolerated at the highest levels. And that's really true of all whistleblowers. It's especially true in the VA. Honest employees cannot act without fear or reprisal. And this corruption cannot exist unless it's at least tolerated at the highest levels, and it is. And there's no amount of spin, no amount of propaganda by the brass that's going to convince anyone the VA is anything but rotten.
Amazing. So I want to go back into discussing some of the things that we just heard. With Dr. Klein and other clients that were whistleblowers, I noticed that there's different tactics, and I forgot to mention this earlier, of the way that they retaliate. They do these fact findings. They do these investigations on the whistleblower. We heard that all of a sudden you become the target of the investigation rather than the corruption is the investigation. They access the medical records. I hear it all the time, unlawfully. So there's multiple forms of retaliation. It's not just being terminated. And I heard also about attorney's fees. That really is an issue. We have a lot of whistleblowers that cannot afford representation. Unfortunately, that is a problem in itself, because if you're not going to have representation, unfortunately, I see so many whistleblowers that their matters fall on deaf ears. I agree with Mike when he said the investigative bodies, they're inundated with cases, they don't have resources. I mean, we really have to, in my office, we follow up all the time with where is the case, what's going on, let us know. I'm sorry to say it, but you gotta be the squeaky wheel. And then we fall into that whistleblower island, like, oh God, that's the screamer. So, just, there's so many issues that that I'm hearing here. I kind of, not everyone says it, but I'm just listening to this, and Mike's correct. You got the OSC, you have the OIG. A lot of whistleblowers go to the EEO, the OAWT. I get phone calls all the time, and people say they filed something with the office, a new office, and nothing. No phone calls, no letters, no nothing. So, I mean, I remember when we filed your case and no one was answering the phone. I mean, it was scary is what it was, because I thought, how is this office supposed to be handling and taking care of these very serious cases where veterans are dying, their safety is an issue, people are killing themselves and such, and you're calling an office that has no one answering the phones, no one's responding to their complaints. So it really becomes, it's a quagmire. You just get into a position where, like, should I call this office? Should I call that office? What should I have done? I hear it all the time, and then and they become, like I said, they become the target of the investigation, these whistleblowers. What's the time, so I know where we are? The time?
Yep.
Should we do questions and answers, or would you guys like to? Okay. Does anyone have any questions? And
I just have a comment. Google Lear versus Zanuck. I got Judge Zanuck removed from my case. Lear versus Zanuck is where Judge Zanuck in middle section of Middle Pennsylvania had an attorney working with me, was a lawyer, who practiced law for 10 years without a license in Kimberly Kitchen. And I have unraveled 33 other cases of that. And my father was a victim of elder financial abuse. I had a case going. And I'm now being retaliated on August 8th for a preliminary hearing. They claiming that I falsely signed a notary signature, which is all bogus, but it was to stay the civil case. So,
Ma'am, the thing about it's different with us is there's a, I'm sorry, microphone?
I'm sorry.
The thing that's a bit different about with us is we aren't even in court of law. In my case, the guys that I reported to OIG, that I was actually cooperating with OIG to investigate them. They're the ones that pulled me out and detailed me pending
Right.
investigation. They're the ones that, because when you do a fact finding, you're not supposed to go out and throw a net and start asking people negative questions. What they do is what they call climate surveys. So they bring EEO in and say, hey, how's everything going? What can you say about what's negative about here? And there's somebody from HR there writing all that down. And that became their fact finding. There's people that came out of the woodwork and made some incredible things. And then, so what OAWP would see is this 40-page, in my case, 40-page thing, and they go, well, there's got to be something there, right? And then but even though they found they lacked candor in my case, they said, we'll do an AIB. That wasn't much of a fact find, so they do an AIB, and that drags out another 6 months, and then they hand pick them. I got all the emails that show they were hand picked. And then they are testifying for all the people that are witnesses. And before that gets called, people are threatened, intimidated by negative testimony, which probably happened to you, I know happened to you. And then that drags it out. So then when OSC gets involved, well, then on this 40 pages turned into 1,600. And so our special counsel sees this and goes, that's a lot of work. There must be something there. Now, we're not even in court of law yet. So and it's a problem for the attorneys, because how do you fight that? Because because the other thing they do is we haven't done anything to you yet. So there's no, you haven't fired you. Well, in your case they did, but they drug you out quite a while. I'm on day 510. Next Monday I'm going to go back. Unlike these guys, they're moving forward. I'm going to go back to an office and do nothing all day. No.
Can I answer that? The key to Jay's case is right now, what he's going through isn't considered whistleblower retaliation. So that's why he's saying what his case is landmark. Is that considered whistleblower retaliation? I think everyone here would say it is. Will it be codified in the law? No.
Yes.
Well, I can answer that question. Yes, it already is. It's a very common form of retaliation that's frequently challenged. And I wanted to raise my hand in addition to just answering the question, Mike. Offer a different perspective on some of the points that have been made today, in particular yours, the last presentation, Mike, because I deeply agree with and believe in the principles that you are advocating. I stood behind them. We've been donating our professional lives at Dept to Dan, Sean Higgins, Shay Wilkes, Brandon Coleman, among a dozen VA whistleblowers. And we represent more of you if there are more hours in the day. So we very deeply believe in this cause. And I asked Brandon what he meant by Whistleblower Island, because it's a phrase which has started to have taken root in our conference. And what did he mean by that? And by that he did not mean bypassing Congress or the media or outside groups, not being isolated, and not rejecting opportunities to work within the organization, develop support within the organization that reflects the backing that you've got from Congress or the media or NGOs or stakeholder groups. At Dept, we know that you're never going to get justice just by working within the organization, but we run legal campaigns that put so much political pressure that the organization's self-interest is leading the whistleblower law. He's been very active in the whistleblower community. He's a leader in VA Truth Towers, just 50 whistleblowers, networking and teaming up with his colleagues who are also whistleblowers. You mentioned Frank Serpico, and I'm a friend of Frank Serpico's and worked with him. Big fan of his as well as a friend. And you're right, it was 2 versus 39,000. But that's because in law enforcement, the code of silence means he couldn't have any chance for solidarity with his peers and his colleagues. They tried to kill him. In VA, it's different. In your agency, there's an incredible, inspiring movement of the whistleblowers to support each other, and there's a chance for solidarity there. As far as OAWP, only 2 or 3 people out of 20 getting help. That's 10 to 15%. That's 2 to 3 times more than the Office of Special Counsel, which is twice more than any other remedial agency in the government. And there's a lesson to be learned from this. You don't plan your life or expect your rights to get you back on the road to recovery by going to a big brother. We're lucky. A lot of times those big brother agencies have been like Orwellian big brothers who have turned on the whistleblowers, like OIG frequently does at VA. The lesson learned from what I've heard this morning and from what I've experienced is we can't count on big brothers. We have to get access to court, where, as Mr. DeNofrio said, you can seek justice from a jury of the peers whom you're defending. You stick your neck out and risk your professional life. Until we have that, in my opinion, although I've fought hard to get all these laws, these whistleblower laws are false advertising as the rule, as the exception. They actually get people justice. We have to get out of the box of expecting whistleblower agencies to save the day for whistleblowers.
So where are we supposed to go for getting out of the box? Where are we supposed to go for getting out of the box?
We've got to get those rights, man. Thank you for asking that question, because we've got a petition outside putting President Trump on the spot.
Tom, can we have a minute, please, to respond? Could we respond, please?
Oh, yeah, but I'd like to answer your question.
Maybe
We got a
his
petition
point.
to get
Maybe I'll
jury
find-
trials
maybe I'll
for
find-
federal, excuse me, to get jury trials for federal employees. That is, I'm not gonna be able to die until we get jury trials for federal employees. And we all have to have solidarity for that movement.
Okay, Tom, you've had your panel. Can we have ours? I have the utmost respect for Mr. Devine. When my case moved forward, Mr. Devine offered to assist me with my case. He has been, and he's true, he has been probably the biggest advocate for whistleblowers in the country that I can think of. And I have, again, the utmost respect for you, sir. However, I've been at the Department of Veterans Affairs for 20 years. Before that, I came from military intelligence. I have every security clearance you can imagine. I'm a model government employee, and my life has been destroyed. And you know, sir, that thousands of whistleblowers' lives have been destroyed. The Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection has almost the identical budget of the Office of Special Counsel and handles a fraction of the cases. Nobody knows what the OIPW is. They did not even. Congress found last week, and I've been working with the Government Accountability Office for 2 years. No one knows what the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection is doing. No one knows. They don't maintain a budget. They don't keep their budget. They have not published a single policy. They have not published a single directive. What we're speaking to is our experience. We're the whistleblowers. I am a well-respected veteran. I am a well-respected whistleblower. And I can tell you firsthand, I have my conversations with Mr. O'Rourke that he asked to meet with me when he told me that the Office of Accountability and Whistleblower Protection had fixed the VA, and Mr. O'Rourke told me there was no more whistleblower retaliation. It's sad. I mean, it is pathetic. My comment was, sir, that is untrue. Whistleblowers, you're seeing 3 right here. This is a physician from Yale. This is a veteran and a service chief, a chief facilities officer, and I'm an administrative officer at a facility hospital. We are still facing retaliation. And Mr. O'Rourke's comment to me was, I am not used to being questioned. And I believe we saw that last week at the House Committee hearing.
Exactly.
Where Mr. O'Rourke stated to Congress that he had communicated with the IG, which did not happen, and that Congress is now pursuing, the Democrats are now considering perjury charges. They stated that Mr. Klein, Dr. Klein, I apologize, yeah, Dr. Klein, OSC had supported his termination, which is not true, as Natalie, I'm sure, can tell you. They fought for Dr. Klein to keep his, they issued a stay, and because there was no MSPB quorum, which no one has fought for, which is what I'm requesting, Dr. Klein was terminated, because there was nobody to keep him from being terminated, because the administration decided they didn't want to put MSPB judges up there. So I respect you, Tom, but I think you're wrong.
I add to that. The reason Frank Serpico was isolated is because the rest of the cops were too corrupt or too cowardly to join him. And that's the exact same thing at the VA. That's just a bunch of nonsense to say, yeah, bring him into the fold. The administration is too corrupt, that's why you can't be brought into the fold. You can't work within a corrupt system.
Well, you can't work outside of it either. I've had this, I could have quit a long time ago. I probably should have, if I had any sense in my head. But, and Tom, though, as far as the killing people, there was a report that come out in January that said if you leave veterans alone, isolated, they have thoughts, suicide and all that. What do you think that the past 510 days have done to me? Every 8 hours, sitting there all day. I have the opposite of work release program. I have to go from my house to and then they knowingly put me in a room next to a construction job site that was full of asbestos and silica. And I breathed that stuff for a few months till I found an OSHA report. So that's some folks might consider that attempted murder. Yeah. They did the same thing with my good friend Dr. Alice Buckley back there too. Just awful stuff. So
What's the time?
You got time for more questions? Anybody else?
So I want to also add that this is just addressing the issue of where do we go, what do we do? With Dr. Klein's case, I found that Senator McCaskill and Senator Johnson were very, very helpful. They do bring light into this issue. I think it's very important to reach out to the congressmen, senators, congresswomen, senators, and ask them for some change in this legislation. I think the most important thing is for law or some kind of justice to be created, because when you don't have justice in a courtroom, you have justice through the court of public opinion. And I think a lot of people are aware of the injustices that are happening to whistleblowers. So we also have the media, thankfully, that help expose these issues. And I think one of the greatest things that we have in this society is that the media is willing to show and share. The transparency is so important for the VA and for veterans. If you don't have that transparency, we're talking about what's the budget, how many cases are coming in, how many are being reviewed. Crickets, no one knows. And it's very important that we know as a society how our veterans are being treated, who's treating them, and who's paying, and who's not receiving care, and why, and fix that problem. When you have, as I believe, whistleblowers are heroes. There's a lot of people that are living out there because of whistleblowers saved them somehow, somewhere. If it's airbags or if it's seatbelts, tobacco. Whistleblowers have come forward and they're in our society. They're so instrumental, so instrumental. So retaliating against them, abusing them, bullying them isn't really going to fix anything. It actually it's self-destructive. Society is self-destructive when we harm our whistleblowers. What we need is to let them share their stories. Thank God for people like Mike Volpe out here that actually shares these stories of the whistleblowers and what they go through. I see a lot of changes happen whenever these stories get, as you're talking about. Sometimes there's justices for these whistleblowers, but that's far and few between. It's not enough justice out there. And I believe that with help of legislation, that's a really important factor. I agree with a jury of the peers. There's a potential that whistleblowers, there's always going to be corruption and abuse and waste and abuse and fraud. There's always going to be that. It's just the way that life is. The important thing is to make sure that those people that cause waste abuse, they're the ones that are investigated. They're the ones who are, those investigations, those as I want to say, like circuses that they put the whistleblowers through. That needs to happen to those that have caused the harm, not the whistleblowers that exposed it.
I just say one thing, I'm starting to make it real quick, is it goes for all these agencies out here, they need a DOJ investigation of Office of General Counsel of everyone. Because this is where they block everything, is the attorney-client privilege, attorney work product, and that's where you can't get it through a FOIA. And there's a bunch of people that, it's not as huge as you would think, as people are afraid, but there are a lot of people there, if they swallow the nail, they'll spit up a corkscrew, they're so crooked. But it can be fixed if they take away their insurance policy of the General Counsel. General Counsel didn't represent the agency, American people and veterans. They fixed that. And then just one, You guys are my hero. I've read about all you guys, Tom. I see a bunch of you. I've read all about talking about the big hero. I don't feel like I'm a hero. The heroes walk in the front door of the VA every day looking for help. That's how I feel. But you guys are heroes. You are. I really did just do my job.
I think we're right at the end. I'd like to end this on a positive note. I know that my name's been out there, and I've had my 15 minutes of fame. I've published a book, etc. But
published three,
I
didn't
would. 3 books. Yeah. And I would prefer my legacy not so much to be Dale Klein the whistleblower, but Dale Klein the whistleblower advocate. So now my energies are going mostly to try to help other whistleblowers and most importantly the veterans. And I think we need to take some of this negativity and put a positive spin on it. And that's what I've been doing this week on Capitol Hill, is trying to do things that can advocate for whistleblowers instead of just complaining. And I have seen some positive developments happen. And if you want to talk to me about that offline, I'll be happy to do that. So I hope that we can put our negative energies towards positive things so that 5 years from now we can look back and say we've made a difference. Thank you, everyone.
Can I say something quick?
Sure.
So, I've been a whistleblower for the disabled children and for all the children in New York State and ultimately the nation because there's dangers in the gym. I keep having this vision that we need to have and start it ourselves, an independent whistleblower coalition with educated whistleblowers like yourself. Respect. I mean, I lost my career 30 years in the New York City Department of Education because I wouldn't look the other way as I was told. Children had been killed and I reported it. So I lost one career and I'm heading into another one. And I think, like you, I want to make it a positive. I hated whistleblowing and now I'm proud, so proud, because we need to get stories, the most egregious ones, veterans, the disabled, children. Money you can always replace. And get that to Congress or whoever, and if they won't listen to our independent whistleblower coalition, no one knows. I have my doctorate in corruption, okay, so no one knows more
We have
than
a
we
field
know.
day sometimes at VA. The VA's like a clown car.
And
You get the clowns out, it's a great car.
And then my is because whistleblowers are injured, they're dangerous, they're scared. Get a little bit of a snippet of them on video, because I did the documentary, I know it works. When you see the pain and the truth coming out of what has been done in a 3-minute snippet of someone, they cannot look the other way. They must act. And I think independently we need to do that. Education, VA, transportation, whatever it is, get 1 or 2, so have a panel of 10, and just be a force to be reckoned with. You are going to listen to us, and you are going to do the right thing.
Really quick, Representative Jeff Miller used to be the head of the House Committee. House Committee of Veterans Affairs. He made a comment at a hearing. I guess the last whistleblower hearing they had was 2015, and he said there's a lot of great people at the VA, which I'm sure is a lot of great people in the New York school system or places like that. But there's a lot of rotten people at the VA, and they need to go. We're all up here for veterans. It's not about any one of us, but there needs to be accountability. At the VA, we've had senior officials stand before Congress, raise their right hand, plead the Fifth Amendment, and then return to their jobs. That sends a message that no matter what I do, I'm safe. And we're all mid-level folks. We're not at the top. But that trickles down to us, and it also sends a message that, if they're not going to do anything with people at the top, then they're not going to do anything with me. And when I spoke to Congress this week, I met with the House, the Senate, on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and they said, what would send a message? And my answer was, fire someone. Fire someone, and these folks that pled the Fifth, prosecute them. That will be a message that no one would forget and would change the culture.
Yeah, I've got one question, which is, I'm R. Levine. I wrote about corruption and problems in the VA for Newsweek in my book, Mental Health Incorporated. Given that the new laws passed under the, rubric, the new firing authority under the rubric of getting rid of the dead wood and the bad players, but it's being used clearly to be harassing and retaliating against whistleblowers. How would you design a law that would protect real whistleblowers and allow an honest VA secretary to get rid of bad players and deadwood more efficiently?
And that's what I was going with the idea. The issue, we keep making laws, and these laws are great laws. I mean, Tom was involved with the Whistleblower Protection Act, which was the greatest law for video whistleblowers ever. However, we don't have access to the jury of our peers. What that brings us is transparency. That takes all these records that we're talking about, sorry, and it puts them in the public sector. We can get stalled in these merit system protection board, these administrative law judges. We need sunshine on our judicial due process. And I think Tom, I respect you so much. I think we agree on that. And I think that's something Congress agrees with too. And it takes it out of Congress, it takes it out of laws. And if you lie to a federal judge in federal court, you will go to jail. Good chance, I can't guarantee, but the chances are you will go. And if you're found in crime, often you will be prosecuted. That doesn't happen in the executive administrative due process systems. No, I understand not everybody who commits perjury gets in trouble.
And Tom?
I'd like to add to the perspective that Dale was sharing and have some solidarity with Jay, because I think we've been debating on when we don't disagree with each other. I'm not a fan of OAWP at all. In fact, in the Washington Post a few days ago, saying maybe a Trojan horse. The reason I opened my big mouth is in 40 years, I've never seen a big brother agency that was a credible source of justice for whistleblowers. I take it as a given that these agencies, it's a happy surprise when we get help from them. The reason I'm speaking out and want to recruit everyone here is we need a campaign to get access to court with jury trials. The corporate whistleblowers have it. Every other sector of the American labor force, whistleblowers have access to court for jury trials, except federal employees. And until that happens, your wonderful rights under the Whistleblower Protection Act may not be worth the paper they're written on. Join our petition and join our campaign.
I don't think how much more time do we have? 2 more minutes? Okay. One more back there? Ma'am?
Go ahead and scream.
Yeah, one more. Okay, I'll go ahead and scream. Michelle McDonald. I'm Michelle McDonald, 30-year attorney whistleblower of the judges, and I don't think going to the judicial branch is the answer. I understand due process. I think all of us have this, or our culture thinks, or maybe it's our court culture thinks that due process is just giving us a process. No, there's 6 elements of due process, and if one of them is missing, and that's in the VA, if one of the processes is missing, and I see it's probably a mess, then you have not had due process within your own agency. That's the problem. You're not yet seeing that you haven't had due process. So going to the judicial branch, and I'm a whistleblower of the judicial branch, you don't get jury trials quickly. That's part of due process. So I would beg to differ that another law, like somebody said, is the answer. It isn't.
You do get discovery though, and they have to cough up.
Yeah, maybe.
I wrote a book with Michelle, and I said, trials by jury is not great, but it's a lot better than anything else.
Again, thank you so much for coming today. I'm glad you got to hear everyone's stories. Thank you to all the whistleblowers out there for protecting us, for protecting veterans especially. And I really appreciate everyone coming today, and we look forward to next year.